What is going on, y'all? My name is Hunter Suchland with LS Lures, and today we're going to be showing you guys some of the basics of flipping and pitching a jig. We're going to talk about rods, reels, and line. We're going to show you what cover I like to attack, how I like to fish it, and how to catch more fish on a jig. Before we get into today's video, guys, make sure you like and subscribe right down below. We've got a link to our website down below. All of our jigs are hand-tied, hand-painted, handcrafted by ourselves. We put the highest quality materials we possibly can into them, and they catch a ton of fish, as I'm sure you guys are going to see today. Alrighty, boys, before we dive into the on the water part of this video, where we really break down how I like to do things, what techniques I like to impart, how I work a jig, where I throw a jig, all the good stuff and things. A couple things I want to talk about. First part, if you're new to jig fishing, the size of jig you throws, the size of jig that you choose to throw matters. You know, if you're brand new, 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce in some kind of flipping style like our Midwest flipping jig is going to be your best friend. Smaller jig gets more bites. It's a lot easier for a large variety of fish to eat. You know, smaller fish aren't scared off by it. You're going to get snagged a lot less because it's a lot harder for a lighter jig to work its way down into cover and get wedged in a way that's impossible to get out. So you're going to get less snags. You're going to get more bites because it's less intimidating to fish, and it's generally a lot easier to fish with. So if you're looking for a basic jig to just start off with, get a ton of bites and gain a lot of confidence, our Midwest flipping jig in any of the colors is going to be your best friend. You know, naturals for clean water, darks for dirty water. You're going to be about set. And 1/4 or 3/8 ounce. Now, if you guys are really getting into this, if you're brand new, some kind of heavy action rod or a medium heavy is going to be your best friend there. You know, this is a 7-1 heavy Phoenix feather rod. It's an absolute perfect do-all jig rod. I can flip, skip, swim, do whatever I need to with it. It cooks fish, it keeps fish pinned. It does a great job there. Pick whatever. I'm not here to promote rods. I'm not here to do anything like that. Just make sure you're throwing something that's heavy enough there. So medium heavy for lighter jigs, lighter cover, a heavy action for heavier cover, heavier jigs, all the good stuff and things. As far as line goes, minimum 15 around light cover or gin clear water. 17 or 20 pound test is going to be your best friend. You're going to see some heavy cover today. I'm going to break that down a little bit more. But with the jig, it's got a heavy hook on it. It's got a brush guard that you have to collapse down all the way. So by running heavy line, you're going to be able to get that fish out of that heavy cover. You're going to be able to collapse that brush guard down, and you're going to have just a substantially more enjoyable experience if you're fishing heavy enough line. You know, you're getting big bites, you're fishing thick stuff. Do not be the guy that throws, you know, 12-pound or 10-pound line or something that's too light and breaks off the fish of a lifetime because it wasn't heavy enough to turn that fish's head, got you buried, and it disappeared forever. As far as a reel go, anything over a 7 gear ratio there, 7's going to be your best friend. 7-1, 7-4, 7 anything, you're going to be golden. You're going to have a great time there. Now, a couple of things before we get into the video too. Again, I said I'm going to show you all that. That's all coming. We don't have a ton of fish catches today. This is more of an educational video. Watch some of our other stuff if you want to see some fish catches. But when you're flipping a jig, some of the biggest mistakes I see with guys is going to be you pitching into cover, you don't let it hit the bottom, you overwork it, you do too much, it just doesn't work out super good. So if you guys, as you'll see in this video, are flipping a jig, you're just learning it, make sure when you pitch that bait in there, you make as little splash as possible and you wait for that jig to hit the bottom. You know, if you're in deeper water, strip some line out, make sure that bait falls 100% straight down, because the straighter that jig falls, the more you let it hit the bottom, the more bites you're going to get, you know, because if you start working that jig before it's ever hit the bottom, you're running that bait away from bass before they get the opportunity to eat it. So don't be afraid to let that bait hit the bottom. Let it sit for a second or two, sometimes more, sometimes less. The colder water, the longer I like to let it sit. The hotter the water, the more active the fish, the quicker I'll let it go. If your fish are super beat up and pressured, let it sit for a while. It's never going to hurt to let that jig set more. So make sure it hits the bottom. The next thing that you're also going to see in this video, make sure that bait hits the bottom after every time you hop it or drag it. A lot of guys get in the rhythm, you know, where they pitch that bait out there and they're doing their thing and they're just working it along and they're hopping it, and that bait never hits the bottom. A jig is a bottom contact bait. Okay, you can swim it. I'm not saying you can't. We'll talk about that in this video, but a jig, the most effective way, especially when you're learning, pitch it out there, lift your rod tip up, let it hit the bottom, do it again. Okay, hop it a couple times, swim it a little bit, but make sure that bait returns to the bottom, because that's when most of your bites are going to come. You know, they'll either eat it on the fall on the way to the bottom, or they'll eat it the second it hits the bottom there. So make sure you return to point 0, which is the bottom with that jig. Lastly, guys, the last thing I want to talk about, if you guys are new to this, we've got a ton of requests for this video. If you're fishing a jig and you're new to it, make sure you're fishing the right part of the cover, okay? This is not a bait that I can go ahead and I can pitch in the middle of a grass mat and it's not gonna get a bunch of grass on it, okay? This is not the end-all be-all magic bait of it's never gonna get snagged, but if you fish it appropriately, if you fish with a soft wrist like we talk about in this video, and if you fish cover appropriately, you're gonna catch more fish, you're gonna get more bites, and you're gonna have a much more enjoyable experience fishing a bass jig. So when you're fishing cover, fish the outsides first, work your way in. You're gonna get a lot more bites that way because you're less likely to get snagged in the beginning, fishing the outside, working your way in, than you are flipping in there, getting snagged, ruining that piece of cover, getting mad, whatever, right? Fish the easy stuff first, get the easy fish out without spooking everything else, and then work your way into that cover. The next thing, a lot of times when you guys pitch into some of this real thick stuff with a jig, that jig is meant to hit the bottom. You're gonna shake it a couple times, and then it's probably gonna be a pain in the ass to get out, and that's okay, because most of those fish are gonna eat it the second it hits the bottom or the first time you shake it anyway. So it's not a bait that you have to pitch in the absolute thickest of stuff and expect that it's gonna come through everything scot-free. This thing's gonna bump into stuff. It's gonna hang up a little bit. As long as you have a soft wrist, shake it out nice and easy. You're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be a lot better for you. Set your expectations 100% right there. But guys, we're gonna jump into the on the water portion of this video. We're gonna get out there, we're gonna show you how I like to flip and pitch, how I like to roll cast, what parts of the cover I like to target, and what my thought process is as I'm going through stuff. This is not gonna be a super long, in-depth video. It's gonna be pretty basic. Let me know exactly what you guys wanna see next time, but this is gonna be a really good starting point for showing you guys how to fish a jig, how to build confidence, and how to be a lot more effective when you're on the water. There's more stuff coming like this in the future. We're gonna talk about dragging, we're gonna talk about fishing deeper grass, we're going to talk about live scoping with the jig, but for today we're going to go over the basics of how to pitch, how to flip, how to get the outside of cover effectively, how I like to break down laydowns, all the good stuff and things, and we're going to let you guys see what happens.
Alrighty boys, and you know the drill. If you've seen our videos before, you know on Tackle Talk Tuesdays we always announce this week's sale. This week we're doing 15% off all of our Midwest flipping jigs, every size, everything we've got in stock right now, and that sale launches tomorrow, Wednesday, October 8th, and goes until Friday on midnight. So make sure you check them out on our link below. If you guys don't want to miss any of these sales ever, if you're worried about missing a video or anything like that, also join our mailing list. The link's down below too. But 15% off all of our Midwest flipping jigs from tomorrow, Wednesday at 5 p.m. all the way until Friday at midnight there.
Nope. First thing we're going to be talking about, guys, is just the basics of pitching the grass. Now, there is a difference between pitching and flipping. Pitching is going to be when exactly what I'm doing right now, where I'm taking that bait and I'm doing a small underhand cast. It's called a pitch, and I'm going to pitch it right to the edge of that cover, let it sink all the way to the bottom, give it a second or two, pop it a couple times, rip it out of that grass. It's going to get caught on it, but every time that jig gets fouled up in that grass, I'm just going to go ahead, snap it free with the rod tip. Using a heavy rod for this technique is absolutely essential, especially around heavier cover. You can get away with a medium heavy, but a heavy is going to get you a lot more play when it comes to ripping that jig out of that grass there. But all I'm going to do, I'm starting off here, is going to be pitch it to the edge of that grass, let it hit the bottom, hop it a couple times, and reel it back there. Biggest thing with this is being very thorough, covering the high percentage areas. Anytime you see a swirl or anything move in the water too is never a bad idea to pitch to that. We're using a 7-1 heavy. It's a Phoenix Feather light rod or Phoenix Feather rod. But all we are going to be doing to start off with is just going to be underhand pitching with that jig, trying to make as little splash as possible. The more splash you have, the more noise you're going to make, the more likely you are to spook those fish. You know, if I pitch in there and they don't know what's in the water and it shoots past them and surprise them, the odds of me getting bit are substantially higher than if I make a big splash, spook them, scare them away from where they're at. But the biggest thing here, especially when we're just starting off, is I'm not trying to flip every single piece of grass in the beginning. I'm just hitting the high percentage stuff, I'm hitting the corners, I'm hitting the gaps in the grass, I'm hitting that hard edge, and I'm just looking to see exactly what these fish are up to. Now, like I said earlier, there is a difference between pitching and flipping. Like I said, I'm pitching right now. I'm making small, underhand, accurate casts. It's considered a pitch. If I was flipping, I would have my rod in this hand, and I would be setting this bait down wherever I wanted it to be. I wouldn't be reeling a whole lot. Wouldn't be doing anything too crazy there, and I would just be setting that bait down. where I want it. I prefer I prefer pitching. I feel like I can be the most effective with it, get a ton of bites. And right now I'm just going to start by pitching this outside edge of the grass, trying to find some of those fish that are positioned there. You know, the sun's not real high. We don't need to get super thick into that cover. The higher the sun is, more often than not, those fish are going to get into the thicker cover, into deeper shade. Right now, just to start, we're gonna go ahead and flip this outside edge, see if we can't draw a couple bites here. Now, when you guys are doing this, the biggest thing is if you're learning how to flip or pitch and you want to be a lot more effective, take that jig, put it in your hand like so, and I want to take my rod and roll that jig out, okay? Let it fall. I'm getting into a little bit deeper water, so I can't really afford to click my bail right away. So take this, put it in my hand, and I'm just gonna roll that bait out, okay? The lower you can keep it to the water, the less splash it's gonna make, the easier it is for you guys to control that bait, and the more bites you're gonna get, you know? Because if I'm here like doing this, it makes a lot bigger splash. It lets those fish know that, hey, somebody's here trying to catch me, you know? These fish are getting smart, they're getting fished for a lot. So the lower you can keep, that's a horrible example. The lower you can keep that bait, the more control you have. And if you're gonna go too far, just put your thumb on the spool, okay? It's better to put your bait exactly where you want it with a little bit more splash than to crash into something that you're gonna get all fouled up in and then rip half of that piece of cover out, you know, like rip that whole clump of grass that you're trying to flip out because you put your jig on the wrong side of it, it got all fouled up. And now you're not having a good time, you know. One mistake I see a lot of guys make when they're doing this is they take their jig, they pitch out there, they engage their reel right away, and they start doing their thing, trying to hop it back. You know, that jig hasn't even hit the bottom yet. The biggest thing, and one of the things that's gonna make you the most successful jig fisherman, is allowing that bait to fall all the way down to the bottom, and then starting your approach. You know, play around with it, do a bunch of different retrieves if you have to. You know, I've got my cadences that I like, but one thing when I'm just starting off is I like to play around with a bunch of different ones. So I will start doing exactly what I'm doing right now. You know, I'm pitching it out there, I'm hopping it, I'm letting it hit the bottom, I hop it again a couple times and I reel it back in, you know. Some days you have to work it a little bit closer to the boat. Other times they're gonna eat it right on the fall just about every time. Sometimes you have to let it sit, but one thing to note is that you're gonna wanna play around with retrieves and let those fish tell you exactly what they want, you know. If they want it on the outside, if they want it swam, if they want it pitched deeper into that cover, play around with the trees. The biggest thing that you want is just to make sure that that jig hits the bottom, sits there for a second or two, and then you can start doing your hop. That's gonna let those fish get their opportunity to get up there, try and eat it, and then you can start your approach on the way out. Now, another thing that to keep in mind is when you're jig fishing, in this part over to my right here, we've got some lanes going on to where there's some really nice little alleys. And you know, I could pitch and flip my jig, but one way, again, I'm just getting here, I haven't got a ton of bites, I haven't got any bites yet, is I can take this jig, since I've got a little kicking trailer on it. You don't have to have a kicking trailer, but one reason I like to flip or throw a kicking trailer on a jig a ton is so that I can swim it around some of these edges, cover a little bit more water, and see if those fish are willing to chase. You know, some days the biggest difference is you're just moving your jig too slow or they don't want it on the bottom. So if I go ahead and swim that jig, I can really go ahead and figure out exactly what they want, cover water a lot more effectively. And if they'll eat it when I'm swimming it, the amount of water I can cover goes up exponentially. And a lot of times, most guys just associate a jig with a bottom bait, you know. They're gonna pick it up, flip it a couple times. If they don't get bit, you know, that's about it. We'll go to something else. But a jig is a really awesome bait to break a lake down with, figure out exactly what those fish are doing, what they want, and go from there. Now, another thing you guys can do, if you don't have a frog rod, or you don't want to fish a frog, or you just want to see if they're in some of these mats, you can take a jig and work it real quick right on top of that mat, drop it to the outside, and see if they'll come up and get it, you know. You work it pretty quick, you know, it's not like a topwater frog and it's going to get snagged on the grass more, but if you've got the right rod and you can pop it out of there, It is not a terrible way to get bit whatsoever. So we're just gonna keep rotating on through this grass. We're gonna mix in swimming it, pitching it, flipping it, and we're just gonna do that until we start getting a couple bites here. Alrighty boys, we've got a lay down behind us, so we're gonna go ahead and show you how I like to break this down, how I approach it, some of the different things that I do to get bit off of these. A couple of these tips are gonna help you guys get a lot more bites, and we're gonna explain exactly why. So as we roll up, we've got a big lay down here right in front of us. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by casting to the outside edge and try and make it as quiet as possible. I'm gonna let that jig fall and hit the bottom and let it sit for just a second. I'm gonna start my retrieve by doing a couple hops. I'm gonna make sure I extend that bait or get that bait to come all the way off the tip of that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna really start fan casting the edges of this lay down first and then work my way in. The reason behind that's gonna be because if there is a bunch of fish on this lay down, if there's multiple fish in here, and I make my first cast to the very inside, you know, my highest percentage area, and I hook one and I drag it out, every single fish that thing goes by has a higher likelihood of not biting because that is gonna spook them. It's got a higher chance of kicking them out, drawing them away from the tree if they chase it, and you're just not gonna be able to catch those fish. If I start on the outside and I pick those fish off and I don't bring them past each other, the odds of me getting more bites off of that one laydown is gonna be exceptionally higher. But when I'm breaking down this laydown or really any piece of wood, like I said, I like to start on the outside and I will slowly work my way in. On the outside, letting that bait, I let it fall all the way down to the bottom, I let it sit for a second, and then I'm just gonna do a couple little hops and work this thing out. And every time I hit a branch, I'm just gonna stop it, slowly work it up over, and let it fall down to the other side, you know. I'm gonna keep my boat a safe distance away. I don't wanna get too high up on it, but I'm just gonna work all of these outer edges first. Again, that way I don't spook any fish. I'm gonna make quiet casts. The quieter, the softer entry you can have with a jig, the more likely you are to get those fish to bite. It seems like it surprises them there. I'm just gonna work all of these really high percentage outside areas first. And let it hit the bottom. I'm gonna hop it a couple times. The colder the water is or the more pressured those fish are, it seems like the less you need to do. Let it sit for a while, don't hop it as much, just kind of slow crawl it around. If those fish are really active or the water's warm, go ahead and hop that bait around, see what they like. Throw a heavier weight, play with some different sizes and whatnot there. But the biggest thing here is just to take your time. Don't do anything too crazy with it. Have a really soft wrist when you're working through that tree. And by soft wrist, I mean, you know, if you're jerking too much, the odds of you collapsing that brush guard down go up exponentially because you're jerking that bait through there. And if you hit one of those sticks wrong, you know, that brush guard's gonna collapse down and you're gonna get snagged. By keeping things really soft in your wrist and feeling along, you know, if you get bit, you're gonna feel it. It's gonna feel like a dang hammer hits your line. Or, you know, just keep a really close eye on your line because more often than not, that's gonna be the first thing to tell you you've got a bite. That line's gonna jump. It's gonna start swimming away, which your jig is not alive. It's gonna go straight down, it's gonna hit the bottom, it's gonna stop moving. So if at any point your jig is moving any direction, you might as well swing because hook sets are free. And it's not gonna hurt whatsoever to go ahead and set the hook. The worst case scenario, you have to buy another jig, but we've got plenty of them on our website here. So now that we've kind of worked the outside, guys, now is when we get to have the fun. By going to the inside, you know, this is where you're going to get a lot of bites because a lot of guys don't have the confidence to get back in there, to let their jig get up in there. You know, they're worried about losing it. They're not going to put a bait way back up in there. But now that we've completely covered the outside, I know that we haven't got bit on the outside. We've covered all of that. Now I can get a little bit closer in here and I can start to make some of these trickier casts to the inside where if I get bit, I'm gonna have to horse that sucker out of there and the fun's gonna begin. But, you know, I'm never gonna get bit if I don't put the bait back there. And as long as I've got a really soft wrist and take my time, I've got a much higher likelihood of getting bit. Now, I just had a little snag there, and like you guys saw, I was able to pop it out. One thing, you know, this is a style of fishing that you are gonna lose baits. You're gonna get hung up, you're gonna put it in places that are really tricky and you're not able to get them out, one thing that you can do, if you guys do get snagged, is you can take that line and pull it out and snap it. And by snapping it, you send that line kind of like a whiplash effect down that rod. And more often than not, you're going to be able to pop it right out just like that. So now we are back into the depths of this tree. You know, I'm really surprised, honestly, that we haven't gotten bit, but we're going to hit some of this ultra dirt shallow stuff back here and just see if one wants to play. You know, we're being really quiet. We're trying not to make a lot of noise. And we're just going to put this bait back in some of these areas where these fish simply don't see them. And that's why we run heavy line when we're fishing a jig. You know, I want to be able to take that fish, horse it out of there, and put it in the boat. Okay? A lot of guys get in the habit, they get too rushed to where they pitch that bait in there, it looks really good, and they'll work it. And you know, a lot of these banks have a drop off, you know, so if I let that bait fall, you know, it hits the bottom the first time and I hop it, and I get in my little rhythm of hopping that bait, it's gonna hop and it's never gonna go all the way back down to the bottom there. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna pitch all the outsides of these bushes here, which may or may not have fish on them. I think a lot of fish in this lake are still out suspended right now, but we're gonna show you that. Now that I've got pretty much all the corners of this kind of covered here, I'm gonna start making some of my casts back into the inside. I'm gonna work that through some of that cover there. Have that soft wrist. Now I'm gonna start to get way back into this stuff there, you know. You gotta get your skipping down pretty good. You're gonna have to play around, and this takes a lot of practice, but as we get the outside covered, I'm gonna start to work my way further and further into that bush. You're gonna get some of those fish that just aren't willing. Oh good, we have fishing line. Awesome, well, we'll get our scissors and we'll go ahead and get this out. This is one thing that is a jig fisherman's absolute worst nightmare. So if you guys get snagged, do not cut your line. Whatever you do, don't cut it, just pull. If you pull straight back, it'll come out or it'll break at the knot. Alrighty y'all, so now we're pulling up to a bank that's got a good mix of grass and wood on it. And so, like I said, the whole point of this video, we're just gonna hammer this home that if you wanna fish a jig, the biggest thing to remember is you wanna cover the high percentage areas, you wanna fish around cover, you wanna hit the hard edges and stuff. And so we're gonna go down, we're gonna flip this grass edge. Now, if you guys suspect that the fish are in deeper, you can pitch into some of these holes. And it's gonna be a little bit different. I know a lot of guys get frustrated by it, but one thing with these holes is you're gonna pitch in, let it fall, let it hit the bottom, shake it a couple times, and then you're gonna try and get it out, okay? But for what we're doing right now and the weather conditions we're presented, and the easiest way to learn this, we're just gonna be flipping hard edges. Now, if you're a guy on the bank, you can do this exact same thing. You can fish all the same cover, you can do all the same things. It just looks a little bit different from you, but you're doing the same thing. You know, you're gonna be flipping those holes, flipping those hard edges, flipping that good looking cover. And we're just gonna do some really soft underhand pitches out this way. Now, if you guys wanna learn how to do this in a really good, like efficient way here, go home, put a plate, put a solo cup, put something on the ground, get a cinder block and go stand up on top of it and just pitch to that dang cinder block all day. Because if you can do that, you can come out here and hit these same targets and be a lot more efficient and worry a lot less about, okay, man, keep getting hung up, I keep pitching too far. Like if you can put it in a solo cup or pretty dang close to a solo cup, you know, you can hit these targets every single time, damn near. The biggest thing when you're gonna flip grass, guys, is edges and holes. Flip the edge, let it fall down, let it hit that bottom, pick it up. And you don't have to hop it, you can just lift straight up too. You know, if you don't want to shake your rod tip, you just lift up, make sure it hits the bottom, pitch over here, let it fall. Make sure it hits the bottom on slack line, lift up. If I'm in some grass, I'll pop it free a couple times, let it fall back down, hit the bottom, come back up. Now here we've got a big old tree in the water, so we're gonna flip the outside edge of that grass. We're gonna pull some line out just because we're getting in some deeper water and I want it to fall straight down. We'll flip a couple of these corners here. Sure I'm not missing anything or scaring anything away. I'll swim it past this one here. And then go ahead and put this sucker right up into the heart of that tree. Shake it a couple times. You'll see you get that jig out of there. Move forward a little bit. You know, the biggest thing right now is I'm not sure how many fish are up shallow. So the last thing I want to be doing, you know, is spending 4 hours flipping the same tree when I don't even know if there's fish on it. Biggest thing when you guys are learning how to fish a jig, learning how to flip, learning how to pitch, all that good stuff, is just glue it in your hand. Make sure you guys have the right setup. This is a 7-1 heavy. Got a 7-to-4 gear ratio reel. It's a Corrado MGL. I've got 17-pound line on here. I would say 17 or 20-pound fluorocarbon is going to be your best friend. And just go out, whether you have a boat or you're on the bank. You know, you can do all the same things from a bank. A lot of guys say, you know, oh, I'm fishing from the bank, I can't fish a jig. You absolutely can. It just looks a little bit different. It might be a little bit more difficult, but you have access to all the same stuff. So get in some of those little weasel hidey holes, you know, make some of those sneakier casts. Nope. Now, alrighty boys, that is it for today. I hope you guys took something from this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. I hope you learned something. I hope you get a little bit more comfortable fishing a jig. It's not that hard. Most people overcomplicate it. Just make sure you're doing it right. You're fishing the edges, you're making soft flips, you have a soft wrist, you know, and if you do all that, you're gonna get a lot more bites. If you have the right setup, you're gonna land a lot more of those fish. So thank you so much for watching. We've got a ton more of these videos coming out. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let me know what you want to see next time. We've got fancy new mics, so hopefully the audio is a little bit better for you guys. Tune in for Cast to Catch this weekend on Saturday. We've got another Hot Tackle Talk Tuesday coming to you next week. Like I said, we're going to do a lot more videos showing you guys the basics of how to fish a jig, how to get a lot more comfortable, and how to land a lot more fish when you're fishing a jig. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.